and let's say they get into the playoffs and they're competitive in a 6-game loss to
How low?
the Jets.
And you're the bar that you're dealing with in your head is so good. Like, I just like seeing you slowly, like, lower. No, too low, a little higher. 6 games, like.
Thomas Drance from The Athletic joins us now because the Canucks, as they have been at so many points this season for different reasons, are interesting. And right now, what I like about them, Thomas Drance, is that Elias Pettersson is hot. 6 points in the last 4 games. Did we give up on this man too soon?
Well, I hope you didn't watch last night's game against the Utah Hockey Club, if we're spinning the Pettersson is back narrative here, because, oh boy, did the Canucks lack any sense of offensive juice. I actually went to the game as a fan, which I don't typically do, but my nephew wanted to go see a game. So I went and sat down in the lower bowl, like closer to the glass than I usually get to see these games. And man, the lack of offensive juice from the Canucks, I was just like, oh, it feels different when I'm paying. It feels different when I'm paying to watch this parade of point shots as, you know, the Canucks get nothing basically thrown at Vejmelka that wasn't a point shot. They scored off one of those point shots, thankfully, but that was all she wrote as the Canucks lost 3-1. Look, Pettersson's shot at least seems to be coming back a bit. He's looking to shoot. It looks like he's got some confidence back as a sniper again, which is important. But, you know, it's not like Pettersson was just a shooter, right? This was a dual threat, elite offensive player. And in terms of the playmaking juice, in terms of the skating speed, I think we're still waiting to see apex or prime Pettersson reemerge here, even though he has been playing better and making a difference for a team that desperately needs him to break some games open here of late.
What's like the general fan thought on Pettersson at this point? Did people want him traded at the deadline? Do they still want him traded this upcoming offseason? Has what he's shown recently been enough to get some people back on board?
So truly, there's this like polarized nature to Canucks fans, and it goes back years and years. I mean, I honestly think it's like dating back to sort of like the Pat Quinn era. You had like a Bure-Linden split. You know what I'm talking about? Then you had sort of this Gillis-Brian Burke split in terms of how fans saw things. And I think the Miller-Pettersson thing obviously became that, not just for the team, but for fans. And so I think there were, you know, like JT Miller loyalists who wanted to see Pettersson dealt, and when he struggled after the season, would continue to say stuff like they traded the wrong guy. And so, you know, I think there was an element or at least a portion of the fan base that would have been totally comfortable moving on. But I also think there's a lot of fans in this market that just sort of want to see Pettersson play better and want to see a star player return to form. I think that's the prevailing sentiment at this point. You know, you sort of want to dance with the one you brought at this, you know, at this juncture, and hope that Pettersson can re-find the game that he had when he was a 100-point guy. Or at least just a consistent difference maker. And you know, now we're kind of in this moment where he gets a run of goals and people are kind of looking for it to be back, right? Looking to post the John Wick meme. And, you know, I don't know that we're there necessarily. Like, I don't think he's there necessarily. This is a guy who I still think is sort of playing at the level of like a fringe first line caliber center, as opposed to, you know, a dominant force. And we've seen him be a dominant force in this league. I don't know that he's getting back there this season, but it's been nice over the course of the past week to see some signs of life anyway.
I mean, this is a group, though, that extended him on that contract. And like that, I'm assuming there's buyer's remorse. But do you think that if he does end the season strong, and let's say they get into the playoffs and they're competitive in a 6-game loss to the Jets, and
the bar that you're dealing with in your head is so good. Like, I just like seeing you slowly like lower. No, too low, a little higher. 6 games. Like, you know, this is like. No, that's the Canucks season in a nutshell. What you just did is the Canucks season. Like, watching your face break as you tried to calibrate where the ceiling for the Canucks should be sent is like honestly what I've been watching on the ice all year. Like, that's exactly, you know, it's just like when you're there, you know, like that tells you everything. The exercise you just went through tells you everything about this team and their prospects, right? Look, I don't think they have buyer's remorse. I think they know what they bought with Pettersson, and I think they've been wildly disappointed, not just with his performance, but with the preparation this past offseason, and obviously how things broke down internally. But the logic of this team, Operation Keep Quinn Hughes, who becomes extension eligible in 14, 15 months, right? Operation Keep Quinn Hughes hinges on Pettersson being an elite player. Like they've made their bet. I don't think there's any way to back out of or trade Pettersson for equal value and have a chance to be better next season. I mean, look at this forward group, boys. Look at this forward group. It's grim. It's grim. Like the only way forward for the Canucks to be competitive enough to make a quality pitch on a long-term extension for Quinn Hughes in 15, 16 months requires Pettersson to get back to the level that he was at. There's no deal that you can make that returns commensurate value. There's no way forward that doesn't involve this guy figuring it out. And luckily, at the very least, for the most part, guys who do what he did for the first 7 seasons of their NHL career, maybe they don't go on to be Hall of Famers, but they tend to at least be Brad Richards or Claude Giroux, right? Like they tend to at least be first-line caliber players. This team needs him to bounce back. Otherwise, you get into that exercise where you're like, maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher. And it's just like, that does no one any favors. Like that's not a recipe to win anything in this league.
So that answers my question, though, because I was wondering, like, are they obviously they're rooting for him to play well for their own sake, but also are they hoping that he can get to the point where just his stock has risen enough that they can trade him for something that is quarters on the dollar instead of pennies on the dollar? But I think that you answer it there by saying that they need to be as good as they can be next year, so Quinn Hughes feels that he's in a functioning environment.
I think they know that they have to be committed to the big center. I just think they understand, and I think they understood even when they made the decision that Miller and Pettersson couldn't coexist. Like, obviously they listened on Pettersson, and I'd imagine they'd continue to listen on Pettersson if someone came up with a creative solution for them. I don't think they'd sort of blanket, no, we're not going to discuss that. So I won't go as far as to say something like untouchable or what have you. I wouldn't push back entirely on buyer's remorse. I just think the logic of what they did when they knew that one of Miller or Pettersson had to go, and they kind of knew all along that it would be Miller. Now, granted, there were, I think, some complications in terms of it being recognized on all sides that it was time for JT Miller in particular to get a fresh start for a variety of reasons. So that was part of it. But I think the overwhelming logic was if we trade either one of these guys, we're going to be worse for a period of time. It's going to take us 18 months to get back to the point we're at now from a talent level perspective. And if we do that with the 31-year-old player, right, by the time we're able to restock to the point that we've got back to the level we're at now, he's 33. Whereas with Pettersson, at least we have a shot of sort of still having a prime age center. So I think the logic of the bet that they've made kind of locks them in to working with Pettersson and finding a way to maximize him. And that happens to be the right move. Like that happens to be what they have to do, organizationally speaking. It's just complicated. And obviously is sort of further complicated by just how long it's been since we saw Pettersson play with the sort of juice that we'd grown accustomed to over the course of his NHL career.
I mean, I'll speak for all of us. I think we're all pretty shocked that the Canucks are in a playoff position, given all the dysfunction that's happened with that team this year. Like, do you think there's any world in which they make noise and disrupt in the playoffs if they get there?
I think the problem is that they're locked into playing the Winnipeg Jets. I think that's the issue, right? More or less. I mean, I think this team has sort of forged this kind of negative identity, which we've seen work for teams. Now, it worked better 10 years ago when goalies were saving 915% of shots, right? Like the 915 save percentage, than it does in a league where goalies are only stopping 900 save percentage in terms of what they're facing, right? Because that sort of decreases variance and increases the impact of elite talent. And so, that's why Connor McDavid last year can have that NBA style run throughout the playoffs. I don't know that that's it's not fertile ground. And the way that the Canucks are playing is this counter-punching team that relies on capitalizing on your mistakes and frustrating you and playing low event hockey and winning a 2-1 game. It like that. They're a 2-1 team in a 4-3 league is basically how I'd sort of frame it. And maybe that could work if you bumped into LA in the first round. Maybe that could work if you bumped into Minnesota in the first round or Dallas. Maybe. I don't think so, but maybe. But a team like Winnipeg is going to be able to pick that apart. A team like the Colorado Avalanche is going to be able to pick that apart. A team like the Edmonton Oilers is going to be able to pick that apart. And there's really no path for the Canucks to find or bump into in the first round, one of, if they even do make it, one of those sorts of first round opponents that I think they could punch above their weight against. I think it's going to be against Winnipeg, and I think Winnipeg has the answers. Like, I think Winnipeg has already stolen the answers from the principal's office. Canucks lost 6-1 to them when they faced them earlier this season. They're playing them on Tuesday, and I'll be pretty surprised if it's not, not 6-1 bad, but I think Winnipeg, I don't think you can sit back against this Jets team. I think they've got too much speed. I think they've got too many different ways to hurt you. So, yeah, I mean, look, what are their odds? I mean, last I checked on the sports books, they had lower odds to win outright than the Calgary Flames. Like, bettors are telling you this. Bettors are telling you they'd rather bet on Dustin Wolf being 1986 Patrick Roy than on the Vancouver Canucks punching above their weight in the playoffs, right? Like, that's what the market is telling you. That's not me. That's what the market is telling you. Like, the Canucks have lower win outright odds than any other playoff team in the NHL, and lower than many of the teams outside the playoff picture as it stands today in the Eastern Conference. Like, it's like 18th or 19th best Stanley Cup to win outright odds. So, what does that tell you? Right? Like, that tells you that a lot of people, a lot of independent evaluators, people who want to put sort of their own skin in the game here, are looking at this team as having a pretty low ceiling. And I don't think they're wrong.
I was going to mention that 6-1 game in January, which is your classic, it was 6-1, but it wasn't that close. And that doesn't feel good when you say it wasn't as close as 6-1 look, because they came out and scored 6 goals. Then I think the Canucks got just like a garbage goal in the third period at the end when it was already 6-0. So not close, but as you mentioned, we do have 2 more games coming up between the two, so we get a little playoff preview. I agree. We're going to do some exercises later in the week on teams and how far they can go. I think that the Canucks against the Jets, and I know the way that we talk about the Jets is wake me up when they do it in the playoffs. They're going to do it in the first round of the playoffs, I feel.
My problem with the Canucks is that, like, they are such a different team on any given night. So to bank on them to win a 7-game series is like, they're one of those teams that can win any game against any opponent on any night, but they're not going to do it over the course of a 7-game series. That's the problem.
Yeah, they can also lose to any given team on any given night, right?
Yes.
Or be completely lost. I mean, look, the thing is I think when you look at their games against like Edmonton, Vegas, and Winnipeg, right? Because then that's sort of how I've been sorting it, because I figure now Winnipeg's sort of built enough of a cushion that it really does look like it's Winnipeg. But, one of those teams wins the Pacific, or you face the Jets in the Central. Like, those are the 3 most likely playoff opponents. And the Canucks have gone, I think, 6-1. I think it's 6-1, and I think the goal differential's 27-10. Across their 7 games against those teams, right? Like, as much as they can beat any given team on any given night, they also have not fared well against the most dangerous teams in the West this season. The Colorado Avalanche are kind of the exception to that rule, and yet, I mean, we all watched the Avalanche pick the Stars apart yesterday, right? Like, I think we all have a good sense that the Colorado Avalanche today are not the Colorado Avalanche we were watching in October and November. Credit McFarland, right? That's an incredible midseason reboot. So
just a completely different team.
I mean, a completely different team, and it shows. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that this team does measure up to the elite teams in the West, and I think they have a floor given the negative way they play, given their defensive reliability. Their penalty kills become elite. Like, they're not lost up a creek without a paddle. Like, they have some method of steering. They have some ability to overcome all the negative stuff that's surrounded them, whether it's been injuries or, the core group sort of fizzling out for personality reasons or Demko injury. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff that they've had to deal with. And they've had margin for error because they do play defense well. I do think they've sort of forged something of an identity, but it's a negative approach to winning games, right? And it's a difficult product to watch too at the moment. And that's sort of where you run into problems, especially in a market as excitable as this one, where like, are they fun to watch play? Like, no. Well, are they good? Like, not really. Is there hope for the future at least? Like, maybe no, probably not.
Sounds
right.
Very
And then
familiar to a team that I watch.
but once you lay it all out, right, that's where it becomes a difficult value proposition in a market where, you've got 2 million people and 1.8 million of those people think they're GMs.
Thomas Drance, this has been one of the more fun, hey, how's that team doing conversations we've had, because you've basically been like playoff-y, but it's gonna suck. So thank you for painting that lovely picture for us.
Yeah, I mean, still some work to go. I've got a lot of Utah hockey clubs stock locally, so I'm gonna hold that. I think it's gonna be interesting here, especially with the Blues getting hot. So yeah, I'm not exactly booking my flights to Winnipeg just yet, boys.
Ooh, well, it bears watching. Thomas Drance, you bear reading in The Athletic, and we will do so. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you kindly. Thanks for having me.
We all silly like the mayor.